everyone, I'm Petrus and welcome to WorldView. WorldView is a podcast where we explore everyone's perspectives on all things that can broaden our worldview. If you've watched our content so far and liked it, please consider liking this video, subscribing, and donating on Patreon. Today we're talking with Tallulah Rendall. Tallulah is a creative facilitator who teaches Qi Gong and Sound Meditations to empower people to connect to their creative expression so they can lead happier, healthier, and more embodied lives. She's also a world-renowned singer-songwriter who has written, produced, and toured 5 albums. Tallulah, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
I've seen you've recently released a new album called Gold. We'll definitely talk a bit more about that later, but I want to talk about your technical expertise in the area of sound therapy. This is something that, at least in my experience, is actually quite underrated, and a lot of people don't know what it really is about. Could you just briefly give us an explanation of what sound therapy is and how you practice it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So sound therapy, basically in the context that I use it, so it's based in somatic practice, somatic therapy. So we're helping people to relax their nervous systems. And through relaxing the nervous systems, we can become more present with what's really going on in the body. And that can lead to integration. So in the context of using the singing bowls and the gong, for instance, I would guide people into a meditation where they would become more settled into their body. And then from that place, I'd bring them up into their hearts, encourage them to relax into that space. And then using the bowls, we go on a journey that really helps to process unprocessed trauma, basically. And the actual bowls themselves, combined with the setup of the meditation, helps to take people down from their sympathetic nervous system, which is that kind of, where we are right now, which is our kind of buzzy day to day, down into the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's where the integration can happen, basically.
Mm-hmm. And is it fair to say that it's also very much a way to deal with anxiety? It's like trying to get away from that and trying to focus on really what the core problems are and dealing with that through this type of therapy?
Yeah, totally. 100%. And I really feel like it's the combination of the practitioner and the method and the sounds that facilitates that. So if you're feeling really anxious or depressed, or there's something that's going on in your life that you haven't processed, and you go into a session with somebody who can really hold you in that field of loving kindness, make you feel really, really safe, and from that place guide you into a process using meditation and using sound to really help you move through that anxiety, then it can be really, really powerful. But I mean, what I really love about it is the combination of the way that I facilitate is also using Qi Gong. And so anyone that comes to work with me, they will finish a session and then they'll be given really clear tools that they can use moving forward to help further integrate the journey that we've had, but also to really empower them how to look after themselves on a day-to-day basis. So the more that you can actually self-care through meditation or through a practice, whether that's yoga or maybe it's gardening or maybe it's for you cooking mindfully, is just all ways that helps to nourish and resource.
Yeah, and I love the fact that sound is used because it really is such a natural language in the way that it doesn't really matter how much background you have or necessarily training you have. There's something that resonates within every person when sound therapy is used. Could you give us a bit more of explanation exactly what the Qi Gong is and how you use it? Perhaps even a demonstration.
So Qi Gong is the best way to put it is a movement meditation. So acupuncture or shiatsu, Chinese herbs are all based really. Qigong is really at the root of all of those. So Qigong follows the meridians. It's a combination of breathing exercises. So if I was standing up and I would be, you see people in the park doing Tai Chi very, very slowly. For example, Tai Chi is a form of Qigong. And it's just a way of you do different movements to help nourish different parts of the body, to help move the energy through the meridian system, to help basically reorganize the energy of the body so that you could, in Qigong we talk about the central channel, which is this thread between heaven and earth. And we're doing various different exercises to reorganize ourselves into this channel. And the more we're kind of in here, the more grounded we are, the more our hearts open, the more that we kind of move through life from a place that leads us to make better decisions in a way. If you're really kind of grounded and centered, you'll kind of maybe maybe not reach for that chocolate bar.
Yeah. No,
Rather than
yeah.
like, if you're really super triggered and feeling like, you know, you're a bit anxious, it's like, oh, what am I going to do? Oh, I might just have that chocolate bar or that cup of coffee, or, you know, rather than actually thinking maybe that's not the thing that's going to actually really nourish me in the long term.
Yeah. And specifically, how did you come by this form of therapy? I mean, it's quite a specific form of therapy in Qi Gong specifically. Did you learn it from a musical perspective? Because I know you're a singer-songwriter, or did it come more from a mental health perspective that you explored this?
For me, it came from a mental health perspective. So I spent, 15 years as a touring musician. I toured all around the world. And I just totally burnt out, basically. And when I got back to England, I was really clear that I knew that I needed to change my lifestyle. And what came across my path was a Qigong teacher. And he taught me various different exercises, which I felt so empowering because I could do them on my own. And I felt such a tangible shift in my body and in my physicality and my energy levels. And then that deepened into me learning about nutrition. And from there, I decided that I really wanted to just immerse myself in this practice because it was having such a radical shift on my own life. So I trained I did a teacher training, but not because I actually wanted to teach Qigong. I just wanted to learn more and more about it. And then I went to work for an acupuncture clinic, helping them set that up. And so I just became really immersed in that world for a really long time. And then part of my teacher training, I had to teach. And I was really, really resistant to that until the point where my teacher said, well, you're such a sound being. Why don't you integrate sound into your Qigong practices? And that for me just opened a total doorway. And I began bringing sound into the movements. And that just led to me birthing this thing called Awaken and Nourish Your Voice. So I started running workshops supporting people who had a lot of anxiety around speaking or singing. And that cultivated into these singing workshops and these singing retreats. And that led to me doing a training in sound therapy. And so it was just like this very slow process over, 10 years. But the radical difference for me has been that I was very anxious. I had a really depleted immune system. It's not a complete immune deficiency disorder, but I had a compromised immune system. So I was constantly on antibiotics. And the combination of these practices plus a really committed seated meditation has totally transformed that for me. So yes, I still get anxious, but I don't get the panic attacks. I haven't been on antibiotics for years. So I would completely attribute that to the combination of these practices that has changed my nervous system and my body's response to stress. So it's not that I don't have unprocessed trauma. I still have stuff that I work on, but my nervous system is just generally much, much more resilient.
Yeah, like you mentioned, it's a lifestyle. It's like all the different elements that combines that you learned and worked through in your life.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to focus on another perspective because you mentioned something like something where if you have anxiety, a lot of people like cope with that by going for that chocolate bar or going for that cup of coffee to get their energy. It really is a scenario where a lot of people that have the time and the willpower and the self-control to get a different lifestyle that's a lot healthier, they lead a more, I want to say, slow-paced life that's more constructive and more sustainable. But other people turn perhaps to supplements. And this is the one I want to talk about specifically. In your perspective, what do you think about the methods of medication connected to relaxation and drugs specifically? So say, for example, some people advocate that marijuana or LSD is a method of relaxing the soul. How does this compare with a more lifestyle change in comparison to a supplement use to try and achieve the same thing?
So I would say, from my experience, I've witnessed a lot of people who have gone down the plant medicine route, who don't have, when I say plant medicine, I'd be talking about ayahuasca or microdosing, who don't necessarily have a practice. And when I say practice, a meditation practice or a yoga practice or a Qigong practice, they don't have something that they're working on a daily basis to really center their mind. And what I witness is people going off and doing ceremony after ceremony, but they're not actually really integrating or shifting, because on a day-to-day basis, they don't have that practice to come back to. Now, the people that I know who've worked with plant medicines, who've worked with microdosing and have a very committed daily practice, I've witnessed them have radical shifts in their lives. And I've done microdosing with psilocybin, and I've found it in conjunction with my practices really powerful in helping to work through things. So I think, and also I work with Rose, which is I work with a herbalist, and we run various different workshops and retreats. Working with Rose in conjunction with sound therapy and Qigong. And it's just a really powerful heart opener and tool to help integration. And it really helps to process grief. So I'm an advocate of, you use the word supplements. I'm an advocate of plant medicine in conjunction with a practice. And I would really encourage anyone that's going down that supplement plant medicine route to have a practice. And without it, I just watch people it's just like a loop, you know. Yeah.
No, so that's the important thing I want to point out, is that there's actually no supplement for the combination of the two. You have to work together. You have to use plant medicine in conjunction with a lifestyle and meditative change, because the perspective that I've had was that a lot of people think that plant medicine alone will help them while they continue to go on the same high energy level of living and anxiety and stress, and it doesn't work, and it sometimes even compounds the problem. Or is that not the experience?
I think compounding it, maybe it could just re-trigger it. I don't know. But what I would say is that in regards to the lifestyle choice, I know that from when I was having regular acupuncture and I was having endless chest infections. It was like one after the other. And I remember my acupuncturist saying, every time you come in here, we're just patching you up. It's not until you change your lifestyle, stop pushing yourself to that limit, that your body will actually stop getting so sick. So it actually, in this instance, it was acupuncture and herbs that was enabling me to keep going. But it wasn't until I took the pressure off and actually looked into what was driving that pushing myself so hard, that led to a lifestyle change. And, during COVID, for me personally, suddenly the brakes were just on. Just suddenly it was just like tumbleweed. And I spent my life, even as a practitioner, as a facilitator, traveling around the world. I'd kind of very cleverly just changed my musician's touring lifestyle to a facilitator touring lifestyle. But I was, on some level, still pushing myself at that level. And it wasn't until this last year where it all went that I actually had to sit with the next layer of stuff that I'd been so cunningly avoiding by being a facilitator. And I'm not saying that all that's completely integrated. I'm still, there's still stuff there, but we can do a really good job of avoiding our shadow, or convincing ourselves that, that's okay, Exactly. And I think it's a constant evolutionary process. It's a constant kind of, you change your lifestyle, and then you just still have to have those marker checks,
Keeping yourself online. I want to talk about your latest video called Gold. Could you tell us the story about it, how it came about?
Yeah, thank you. So in Christmas this year, the desire to connect musically with people just came so strongly. I really, really missed that part of my life. I play with an amazing harp player, and I play with a wonderful double bass and cellist, and I was really, really missing that. And the Liminal, this is my fourth album, and all my albums are released with a CD and a book, CD book and a download code. And there's a piece of artwork for each of the songs, and it tells the stories, and there's the lyrics and stuff. And this album was a weaving together of my sound therapy world and like my normal songwriting world. So I just started, rather than using synths, I sampled the singing bowls and the gongs, and that was the kind of tapestry that the album, basically the soundscape of the album. Anyway, so it got to December and I just felt like I really wanted this. I felt like this album needed to go further out into the world, and I really wanted to connect with people. And so I put this message on all my social media platforms just saying, if you want to get involved, I'm going to release this single called Gold from the Liminal, and send me a video. Just do whatever you want to do in response to listening to this track. And what happened was 108 videos from all around the world, people in full fancy dress, people tobogganing, their kids, their dogs, their cats. And it was this incredible experience of bringing people together from all these different continents, all different lifestyles, all different genders, nationalities, ethnicities, and creating something that felt like a really positive beacon of hope and connection at a time of being so separate and isolated. And there were quite a few people who really wanted to be involved, but were really resistant. And it was just, it was just too much. They were too inward to the thought of actually kind of doing something that was going to be so visible. And what was incredible is, I'd say, I definitely know 5 of those people who, over the course of 6 weeks, kind of just went through this process and suddenly were like, one day just sent me the video and were like, I just really wanted to be a part of it, and here it is. And it was those 5 videos, or however many it was, that were so incredible. There was something so special about those videos. They really, like, something really came through in what they were sharing and how they presented themselves or whatever it was they were doing. And it became just something that was so much bigger than the little idea that I thought it was going to be. It brought so much healing, not only to myself, because I was suddenly in connection with so many people. And it's, I've released a lot of music, and this is the only album that I actually really enjoy listening to. And I was listening to that track every day and editing the footage, and it brought me so much joy and healing. And then this whole community that has grown as a consequence. So yeah, it's been an amazing project, and it's still going. It's called Bright Sky Gold online, and there are still people making videos and sending them in. And the invitation was just to keep on going with it. If you feel inspired, then get creative, just tap into that childish part of you that just wants to dress up or run around in the garden or have a dance or whatever it is. So yeah, that's the story behind that.
It's amazing because I watched your video. It's very inspiring, but at the same time, I also watched a couple of other ones where people had a similar idea, where they also got a couple of people to do something incredibly simple, but just get people to collaborate on a virtual platform or digitally. And all of those have become so popular because I think people were just absolutely starved. They were starved for this type of interaction, especially in the various scenarios across the whole world in which they found themselves, various types of lockdown or regulations that were applied. So no, I think that's such a powerful message and such a creative environment way in which people are connected. I want to talk about specifically the differences, because you've mentioned now that you really enjoyed listening to this album, and you've produced a couple of albums before this as a singer-songwriter primarily. But what were the differences between the music which you created in those albums and the music which you created for this one? Did you apply your expertise in singing, in songwriting differently? Was it changed, or did you just combine the two aspects of your life?
So the biggest shift has been, and it's really interesting to reflect upon this, because each album is such a direct mirror to my personal journey and my personal journey back to myself. So when I listen to earlier albums, sometimes I'm like, what is she on about? I'm so like I'm so like, everything's so metaphorical, and it's so kind of, and this one lyrically for me, it's much more embodied. There's like, I can really feel the shift. For me, it's like a different human being writing these songs. So that's one level. It's like a real reflection of the work that I've done, the integration work that I've done through the Qigong and through the sound practices and through becoming a facilitator and a therapist. So that's really clear. You know, if I was to present you with two albums and I'd say to you, which is the one that I made after 10 years later and which was the one I made before, I think it'd be pretty clear for you to go, okay, that kind of pretty rock and rolly kind of psychedelic album, I'd say that was like your early days. Whereas this one, which, as I was saying earlier, you know, I'm using these instruments to create the soundscape. So sonically, when you listen to the record, it feels, to me, and the response has been, it just like, it feels like you're kind of being held in this very loving container, you know, because it's got this bedrock of these instruments underneath it. And I'll give you a little sample of those later and you'll get the sense of what that is. But so the kind of the sonic tapestry that the songs live in has this very nourishing feel and resonance and vibration to it. But then, you know, you've got like very traditional songwriting over the top. So it's this kind of combination, which I feel has got a potency to it and a spaciousness to it that makes me really enjoy listening to it.
And you mentioned that, I like that you said that the previous albums were kind of snapshots of your experiences, of your journey throughout your life. So kind of like when you go back to it, you remember perhaps, you know, listening to it now, you're like, you know, what was I on about? It's like you said, but at the time it definitely reflected something about you in the way that you experienced the journey. So in that regard, what were some of the experience, perhaps even stories that you could tell that you've had through your travels through the world that perhaps shaped one of those albums specifically, or even this one? I'm assuming traveling is a big component to life experiences.
Yeah. So okay. So I've got three of them here, three albums. This was the second one. This is the Days of Rock and Roll. And I wrote a lot of this when we were on tour in New Zealand and Japan, and I was spending quite a bit of time in Berlin. And the songs on this have a more angular flavor to them, so they're really guitar driven. And it was a multimedia like project. I collaborated with loads of different artists. These guys made an animated film for one of the tracks called Blind Like a Fool. Someone else made this beautiful.
Oh, wow.
You can see that. So there was a piece of art for each of the songs, and I collaborated with 30 artists. It was like this real kind of multi-dimensional project. So people made jewelry, people made sculptures. It was just I was really wanting to collaborate. That was where I was at in my life in that time. So this album was like the collaboration album. Then the next one was called The Banshee and the Moon, and I'd left Berlin and I was living down in Dartmoor. And this was the kind of journey, this was the beginning of the journey inward. And it's called The Banshee and the Moon because when I was living in Berlin, I had this kind of dream, or this character came into my mind called the Banshee. She just became the muse, and she became this character, this woman who I slightly idolized. She just felt really at peace with herself, and there was like a strength and a fragility, but a real kind of containedness about her that felt really powerful and really inspiring. And the songs and really far away from where I felt I was at that time, basically. And she was like the sort of muse and inspiration of what it is that I wanted to become, basically. And this album kind of really narrates that journey. And I'm not saying that that's who I am now, but I'm definitely closer to that person than I was before. And so there's a song on this album called Pieces, which really kind of embodies that kind of like person who's just, you know, in pieces, in that kind of in those broken shards. And then the other part of that is She Rises Up, which is the other part of that, of like the person, in this instance, me, or finding her way back to herself. And a lot of the songs on this album are a journey of that rite of passage, basically. And this one is, I guess, the liminal. The liminal translates as the spaces between realities, which is where I feel we go to in any sound practice or in meditation. We go into that kind of that liminal space when we're coming back to ourselves. It's like in that liminal space that the mind quietens and we can become present in the body and the heart. And this is just a really celebrative album. It's, it's got gold, it's got radiate, which is really all about how the chorus is we radiate love. Gold, the chorus is we are one, we are gold. And it's just really celebrating that essence that exists within all of us. And there's a track called Brave, which is also celebrating the fact that we all struggle with our weaknesses and our strengths. And there's another track called Letting Go. It's really an invitation to celebrate yourself. And also speaking into, there's a track called Leap of Faith, which is talking all about what happens when we get stuck, and encouraging us to take that leap of faith into the unknown. And the next track is called All in You, because ultimately it's all, that wisdom is within us all, and we are our greatest medicine teacher. We've just got to take a little time and space to come back
to
and
listen to yourself.
To listen to yourself. So it's felt like these albums are a total journey home for me. And now the songs that I'm writing, I feel like I can, they're writing from a different place where, it's a different place again, but yeah.
It's actually, it's amazing you talked about the journeys and the specific places that you went to, not necessarily the places themselves, but the journeys and paths you went on to between touring that formed a lot of the next album that you created. So while you're performing one thing, it formed the future for you, basically. But I'm assuming in those, it's not necessarily only the journey itself, or perhaps the places you went to, but also the people you talk to. And sometimes as a teacher, you're humbled in the most unexpected ways, in the way that the people you teach are the ones who teach you the most. So are there any notable events or interactions at places you've performed at, or even sessions that you've organized, that you would like to speak of, something that really struck or maybe popped up in your mind right now as I was talking about it?
So the person that jumps into my mind, my friend Ben, and when we were living down in Dartmoor, down in Devon, and just this moment where I'd left Berlin and I was kind of on this new path of training as a teacher and facilitator, and I was really feeling the loneliness of not being in the city. And where I was living down in Dartmoor was in this river valley, very, very, very remote and very, very isolated. And I was really feeling that loneliness. And I remember walking down the river one morning, and after a conversation that Ben and I had, and there was like a moment where something like a kind of veil lifted. And I suddenly just saw the world around me, this natural world, these beautiful trees, this river. And it just suddenly, I kind of felt this holding, this connection. I just suddenly, I saw creativity everywhere. Whereas before I'd been really wanting to be part of a community of other people, to kind of spark that creativity. And suddenly I just felt the creativity all around me. And that's where this album suddenly, kind of out of nowhere, suddenly came. So I guess my friend Ben, it was his kind of encouragement for us to move there. And then his committed meditation practice that really set me on a path that has totally changed my life. So that's definitely one. And just thinking about other people who, the bravery, I've got a number of people who I have worked with as a facilitator, but then also who have come across my path through their love of my music. And there's one friend of mine who's become a friend called Sarah, and she was one of my first pledges. So all of my albums have been fan funded, crowdfunded. And when I first met Sarah, she had been bedridden for maybe a year or 2 years. And she'd her parents had managed to bring her to a concert. And I didn't know until then how sick she was. And, she'd been donating money to me making rap albums for years. And that was over 10 years ago now. And I've witnessed her go on this journey of recovery to the point now where she's in the Gold music video. She's got the long red hair. She's dancing. She's looking amazing. She sings in a choir now. She actually has a fully has a functioning life. She's not bedridden anymore. And that was a journey of her. And she set up a charity, and I became the patron of it. We raised money so we could work out what was actually wrong with her. And it turns out she had a form of Lyme's disease and Epstein-Barr, and she's actually now well. And her journey and her bravery and her commitment to supporting me is just beyond humbling. And she's not the only one. There's a lot of other people who have similar stories that have inadvertently just changed my life. And yeah.
Those are beautiful to hear about. It's amazing. I love that there's an actual practical, healing element combined to this journey, and something like that, finding out what the problem is, getting the proper treatment, but also changing a lifestyle to make that a sustainable, recovery is also a beautiful thing to hear. I want to talk about
before you move on, and she now has a daily Qi Gong practice. So she's come on Qi Gong workshops with me, and during this whole lockdown period this year, I decided to do a loving kindness meditation practice every day on Instagram. I do a little live every morning. And this community has grown up of people that, first of all, it was 10 when everyone was in full lockdown. Then it became 9 when lockdown, and then it became 8 as everyone's like slowly going back to work. But she then became a really committed part of that as well. And that for me is just incredible, because she has been on the journey from the stilettos and the rock and roll with me all the way into where it is I am on my journey as a meditation teacher, as a Qigong teacher, as a facilitator. And there's her and a whole bunch of other people that have walked that path with me inadvertently. It's just they've just kept following me, what I do, and suddenly I'm supporting them in a totally different way. And I've actually, until I'm articulating it right now, I'd never actually put those two together. So thank you because that's quite a humbling revelation.
I know for a fact that anybody that's watching this, or there might be somebody that's watching this, it might be going exactly in the same scenario. So we'll definitely link towards your Instagram. I'm assuming you still do those sessions?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll definitely link to that and then recommend people go and watch that, because I think that's beautiful. I think that's really important. It helps people a lot. I want to talk about some of your songs specifically, and some of the songs in the albums. Could you perhaps tell us the story of 3 of them? We'd like to demo them at the end, but we can talk about that. That'd be amazing if we could. But specifically, can We Don't Want War, I think is one of them, Holding On to Love, and City to Sea. Could you talk about those?
So Yeah. So we don't want war. Ay, ay, ay. So, oh, wow. I woke up one morning and I was reading the news, and the headlines was the story of the little boy who had been washed up on the beach trying to escape Syria. And
yes.
so they had been on the boats crossing over, and I don't know if the boat had capsized. I can't remember exactly the details of, but he was one of the victims. And it sparked something in me where I was just like, no, like, God, and I'd been so horrified by the footage of, these refugees and these boats and the military, just all the stuff that had been going on. It just really was such a no for me. And at the same time, one of my best friends in Berlin had taken it upon himself to go to one of the camps, and he's a filmmaker as well as a musician, and he'd started filming and was following these refugees. And so I was really having quite a close relationship with this story. And then another friend of mine who used to be my manager, her 16-year-old son, maybe he was 17, but just volunteered and went out to Greece to go and work, just doing whatever he could. So there was, and I have sort of just actual total goosebumps as I say this, because it was just such a time when I was witnessing something that just felt just so like just such a massive humanitarian crisis. So that was all kind of going on within me when I suddenly saw this image, and it was like the last straw, and out came this song. And I literally wrote it then and there, and I knew that I've always wanted my music to be used for change. I've always been an advocate, a spiritual activist in regards to my music, or just generally, actually, I guess. But I wanted to do something. So I reached out to Danton, who had recorded The Banshee in the Moon. And Danton Suppel is an amazing producer. He did a lot of Coldplay's records and Morrissey records. And I just said to Danton, I've got to make this track. I've got no budget to do it. If you want to do it with me, you want to record it, let's do it. And all the proceeds I'm going to give to Save the Children, who were specifically running a campaign at that time to support the Syrian child refugees. So that's what we did. We went into studio in the Strong Rooms, a wonderful studio in London, and we just did it. And another friend volunteered to come in and film it, and we made the video and put it up, and we raised maybe $3,500 from it, which was amazing. And that went to Save the Children and went towards helping to support those who were these children that were suffering so greatly. But I then got involved more and more with that story and that campaign. And my friend Jamie in Berlin ended up doing a crowdfunding campaign to buy a boat. And the boat's called Sarah. And the Sarah was, whilst he was in Greece, and he was on the beach filming as a boat came in, and was handed a child who had stopped breathing. And this child, she actually did survive, but she was called Sarah. And so he crowdfunded and raised the money for a rescue boat, which is called Sarah, which then became part of that journey to save. And so
that's amazing.
If you are a musician and you're listening to this, the power of music to inspire people to get involved in projects, I would say projects like use your music to inspire change. Use your music because it's you look back at the music of the 60s and the 70s, music has had this capacity to unite and in the kind of age that we live in, it's been so bastardized, and I really feel like there is a movement that still exists, but I really feel like any musician that's living at this time who's writing, just do something worthwhile with it. You know, if the big names of this world, the big hard hitters, God, if they actually spoke out, wow. Yeah, so I won't rant on about that, but that was We Want More.
It's quite important. It's an amazingly important detail to talk about. We talked recently to an historian called Tom Holland, who's also from the UK, who also talked about an experience that he had of refugees, rather, I think is the best term to put it, because they really had no way to go. And that was also in Syria. It was when ISIS was defeated and the people that left behind, their homes were destroyed, but they actually had nowhere to go. So they weren't even able to get out. They were there, their home was destroyed, and they had nowhere to go, and nobody that cared about them, because they weren't a singular group that they could relate to somewhere else in Europe or so. So it's incredibly important to talk about this. It was something we're passionate about as well. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. So that was the first one, and then the second one was Holding On to Love.
Yes.
Which initially I wrote in response to the pipeline that was the oil pipeline, and that was going through native lands in America, and it was part of a project called Protector Project, and we were raising money to support the medical team on the ground. And this was during the Obama reign, when he was trying the Standing Rock period, when he was trying to prevent Standing Rock land from being abused. So I initially wrote it for that, and we sold albums to support the medical team. But then its journey continued when I teamed up with City to Sea, which is a CIC charity based in Bristol, and their mission is to remove plastic from the oceans. And their founder, Natalie Fee, is a very dear friend of mine, and I'm really passionate about the oceans and her witnessing her journey and her fight and what she has stood for and what she advocates. They, as a CIC, were the people who brought refill to the UK. So we can now go, you can refill your water bottle anywhere, whereas, I don't know, 10 years ago, if I had a water bottle, you couldn't go into a bar or a restaurant and ask, there was so we teamed up together and we made a video which was using this song, and some footage that another friend of mine, Rufus Blackwell, who is the most incredible videographer, and he uses drones and stop frame animation and what's it called? I can't remember it now, what the word's gone, but basically he has the most incredible archive of footage from all around the world, and he very generously donated me this footage, a lot of footage from the Kumbh Mela, and we put together this video just, again, as a way of calling awareness to what's going on with the oceans right now. And I don't know if you've seen a recent documentary called Seaspiracy.
Yes.
So, if anyone watching this, you haven't seen it, I really recommend you watch it. We all need to take responsibility. And so, it was a beautiful thing to collaborate with Natalie and City to Sea, and we did a lot of stuff for BBC, BBC Radio around it. And it just felt, it was what I could do to bring my voice and my music to spread awareness around something that I believe so powerfully in. Yeah.
No, that's amazing as well. I love the fact that there's different elements to the songs that can inspire. They can inspire humanitarian crisis. They can inspire ecological crises. There's a lot of different elements. You've now recently produced Gold, which we'll definitely link to in the description below. We recommend people to go watch it. It's very, very inspiring. But the real question is, what's next? I mean, in the past, you were already writing the next album as you were touring the previous one. So do you have anything lined up, or was the lifestyle requires a bit more relaxation in between albums, not that high paced?
So I have album number 6, which I'm about to start releasing, which is an album of mantras that I recorded with the singing bowls. So there's Heart Sutra and the Gayatri Mantra, and that's going to start. The first one of those comes out next week. That's our Heart Sutra. And then I'm also now, number 7, I have written about 30 songs, and I'm now kind of distilling them down. And I've kind of, from those 30, I've got 5 that I've like committed to that I'm really enjoying at the moment. And I started recording those, and I'm going to play them out this summer with the harpist and bass and cellist I play with, and then look to record them fully at the end of the year. So probably release that next year. That's the plan for that. And it was interesting this year because I was writing a lot, but my focus really was on the sound baths and the sound meditations. And for the first part of lockdown, I was doing a lot of one-to-one therapy, and then I just felt like I wasn't resourced enough within myself to be able to hold other people through the processes they were going. You know, I know for most therapists, this year has been like the busiest time they've ever had. And I just, because of my own personal journey, a lot of kind of heartbreak and illness in my family, COVID related, I just wasn't resourced to do one-to-one work. So I decided that what I was able to do was group work and group sound baths, group sound meditations and ceremonies. And so my kind of focus really was around that offering. And it was so, you know, working with these instruments is so powerful for me. It's such great medicine for me as well. And it's such a, you know, I have to really be committed to my own practice to then be of service, you know. So I kind of thought, as I always think, oh, I've kind of forgotten about albums and doing these kind of things. And then suddenly I'm like, oh, where have you guys all been? And there's suddenly like this little bag of all these little stories and all these songs and that have kind of been documenting this journey. So it's a really interesting album so far of songs, because it really is narrating this journey of lockdown. And so
I also heard you did some work in South Africa. Could you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I first started coming out to South Africa a few years ago and had the most incredible time there, and was working as part of a team on a retreat called Skyland, which is great. It was so awesome. But then also one of my dearest and best friends who lives in Cape Town, he's an artist, a photographer called Oliver Barnett. And Ollie and I basically came together to explore somatics, which is how basically the images in this book, it's how music, in this instance, how sounds, the shapes that music makes through water. Here, that's how we captured it. So we put water in my singing bowls and I played them and then captured the movement, the vibrations. So it's so this was this project that Ollie and I started doing, and we just got so into it, just seeing, you know, how the resonance, what patterns they made and the vibrations, and it just began blossoming from that. And the Mantra album that I'm about to start releasing, we teamed up, and Ollie has been making these incredible videos, and he basically goes out into nature and he photographs the natural world in the macro, like tiny, and then builds it up into these animations, and they are just so, oh God, extraordinary. They're so mesmerizing. And the combination between Oliver's visuals and then the singing bowls and the mantras just is really powerful collaboration. So yeah, we birthed this project called The Breath of Life, and we've got a series of videos and we're constantly making new ones. So yeah, I really invite people to check them out. I have been told that they're particularly good to do and watch when you have been microdosing.
I can definitely imagine that. I can actually imagine that. But the thing is I have to highlight the video specifically, because I know exactly what you're talking about. A lot of the patterns and the way that this, you know, the way that it just harmonizes perfectly with the music. Especially I've seen people do similar things with salt that they've put on a plate that vibrates. Those also. Oh my word, those look amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. This has been really, really interesting journey. We're definitely going to link to everything you talked about in the description below for people to just, check them out. I recommend them really to you. A lot of people are going through that journey, and maybe the first thing they just need is just to realize that they're on the journey. Maybe that's kind of the problem, is that they don't really have access to these resources, access to these songs, these things that could speak to them. So in that regard, we'll definitely link to them. I just want to give you a last chance to add anything you want to before we end the interview.
So a couple of things are coming to mind. Is that one thing is that, like, the opening phrase of the liminal. A friend once said to me, we are limitless in our potential, which I think is so beautiful. Every single one of us is limitless in our potential. And I would just really encourage anybody listening to this to create space in their lives to really go inwards. And as you go inwards, just listen to what it is in your heart that really nourishes you. And when you find that, just commit to doing that, whatever that may be. Or maybe that's not doing, maybe that's just sitting outside in nature, or maybe that's walking your dog, whatever it is. But, we are our own greatest healers and wisdom keepers, but you have to do the work. It's not just gonna be handed on a plate, or if it is handed on a plate, then to maintain it, that requires doing the work. So the biggest thing that not mistake, that sounds too much for judgment, but the biggest thing I see is so often people expecting more, and wanting more, that somehow there's that word I can't think of right now, when you say you're kind of like, it's like that privilege, or I can't think of the word, which is really annoying, but just we got to do the work.
There's work connected to
entitled.
Yes, that's the right
entitled.
Exactly.
One of my I have a wonderful teacher called Bergs, and I love his kind of loving brutalness. You got to show up and do the work to actually kind of walk through the fire to come out the other side. And that commitment to doing that can really radically transform your life. So that, and the other thing is around creativity. Everybody, in the same way that we're limitless in our potential, everyone's creative. And we live in a world which is by its very breath creative. Every time you look outside your window, you see creativity happening. Nature is creative. But so often, and this is something I experience all the time with people that I work with, somewhere along the line, someone said, nah, you're not good enough, or shh, or maybe you should do something else. That kind of patronizing shutdown, which, whether that was drawing or writing or singing or dancing or cooking, whatever it was. So if you are one of those people that, doesn't do something because you don't think you're good enough to do it, do it. Really I really invite you to spend time nourishing the creativity that is your birthright, basically. Yeah.
That's a very, very powerful message. Thank you so much for ending off with that. I think it's a perfect way to tie a bow on this. I just want to say to our viewers, for those of you that have made it thus far, you've most definitely liked the video. If you like and share this video, it helps Tallulah really share the message around. It's the first step in reaching more people is becoming that conduit for other people to see something out. And of course, on the other side of the coin, it really helps out the channel as well. If you share this, it helps us to grow the message and let people's different perspectives reach the world out there. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been WorldView.
this moment with a simple breath. The world grows clearer through this new lens, and I can smile. Oh, I can smile as I surrender the worry that I'm not enough. My heart grows wider, my heart grows wide enough to feel that we are one, we are gold. And as we raise up a raise, we are one, we are gold. And as we raise up a raise, we are gold. We are gold, we are gold. Oh, we are gold, we are gold, we are gold. Wash it away in this waking dawn, 'cause now it's time. Oh, now it's time. As the book of stories falling at my feet, the years and tears into the ground can bleed new life to life. 'Cause we are one, oh, we are gold. And as we raise up, we are one, we are gold. And as we raise up, we are gold, we are gold, we are gold. Oh, we are gold, we are gold. And we can let the light on it now, let the light on it now and shine. Oh, we can let the light on it now, let the light on it now and shine. Oh, we can let the light on it now, let the light on it now and shine. Oh, we can let the light on it now, let the light on it now and shine. Oh, we can let the light on it now, let the light on it now and shine. Oh, we can let the light on it now, let the light on it now and shine. Oh, we can let the light on it now, let the light on it now and shine. 'Cause we are gold, gold, gold. Oh, we are gold, gold, gold. Gade, gade. God.